settled. But very personal for her was that she was one of the English as a second language teachers for many of the Vietnamese that came in the 70s and the 80s, and so I always pride my wife in what she does in education. Thank you. My comments will be brief, but as a historian, I have to recognize and thank my good friend Judge Carr. He talked about how we take care of veterans, and certainly he's one of the leading individuals in doing that, creating the Veterans Court here, along with the district attorney, was the second one that was created here in the United States and helps all of our veterans that may get in trouble. I also have to recognize one of my great heroes you just heard from, General Carey. General Carey's son and I came in the Marine Corps together, so while we were trying to finish our college careers and the General was helping Saigon evacuate, and as we were getting prepared to go into our officer training, the General was already a great hero, as you've already heard. We also have Tony Wood over here, another great hero who was in Saigon with the General helping evacuate the embassy and both Vietnamese and Americans that were trying to escape the onslaught of the North Vietnamese as they were coming in. But I want to just kind of do my remarks in terms of talking a little bit about the history and why this memorial, this great statue that you see behind you, is so important. But first of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Dang, Mayor Williams, Dr. Gluck, General Carey, all our distinguished guests, and a special thanks to the board of the Heroes of South Vietnam Memorial Foundation for inviting me, especially Mr. Peter Dow has given me great support in coming here. Again, we're here to honor and remember and preserve the heroic sacrifices of those military service members who bravely fought on both sides and died, and from the forces of our allies also that was mentioned earlier, because a lot of times we forget about them. In this memorial, and this memorial that you saw in the traditional Vietnamese ceremony, to connect you to your spirit of your fallen comrades, your fallen members of your family. It's very important that you know and understand that memorials are about history, and they're about the history that you live and about the history that your families have lived. And the only way that you can never forget them is always talk about those family members in a first-person way, and make sure that their spirit is never forgotten. So every time you pass this memorial or in this park, and it's a great thing, Mayor, that this park is here for the veterans, for the community of Arlington. You've done such a great job, and all the city councilmen, the government, to preserve that and support this legacy here. But I'd like to just kind of walk you a little bit through the history of the Vietnam War. It was a war that essentially started after World War II. When you go back and you look at that history, there are a lot of things happening after World War II. For the United States, it really started with the escalation right after 1954's French defeat of the Dien Bien Phu. The United States put advisors in, advisors supporting the South Vietnamese in trying to defeat communism. Along the way, the SEATO Treaty was signed, the Southeast Asian Treaty Organization, where the United States was going to fight and support the Vietnamese against communism. Of course, there was escalation of the U.S. involvement. By 1965, 3rd Battalion, 9th Marines, United States Marine Corps landed in Da Nang. And then the escalation continued. Some of you have fought in the Tet Offensive, 1968. Then there was Easter Offensive, 1972. And then, of course, during all of that was the Paris peace talks that Henry Kissinger was involved in. And ultimately, we decided that we were going to withdraw. That was a decision that President Nixon made, And of course, General Carey and all of you that may have been there in Saigon at the time, Tony Woods, decided it was time for us to get out. And it was controlled chaos, and they could tell you many stories about that controlled chaos. And ultimately, the biggest challenge we had was, how do you repatriate